Good afternoon. I probably get the best slot before lunch or after lunch, so my aim is to make sure you all don't doze off. Just really quick, my name is Srichari. I'm a partner managing director at Deloitte. I lead all our thinking in biopharma for AI and data. What we're going to talk about today is how do we think about innovative data strategy and approaches for leading biopharmaceuticals, really through the entire value chain from what we call molecule to market. So with that, just maybe a couple more things about myself. Been with Deloitte the last 2 years. Prior to that, was actually a customer, was at Merck, and I've worked across both R&D, commercial, and manufacturing functions. So was a practitioner, recently came over to Deloitte to help build out the capability in practice. I have to start with a forward-looking statement, and I guess my version of the forward-looking statement for all of you is 12 months back, we started talking about RAGs and LLMs, and we've advised now a bunch of clients on starting on the emergence of agents. So this space evolves months, weeks, and hours. So whatever we speak about today is based on present market knowledge and value, and this will continue to evolve over a period of time, right? So before I get into the presentation, maybe a little bit of framing on what we'll try to cover today. I would think about the presentation in sort of three halves. More in terms of the why and why the need for a data strategy, a little bit of the what in terms of how does this enable across the enterprise, and then we'll again come to the how. And throughout the entirety of the discussion today, we're going to try to do equal emphasis on the why, what, and the how. Now, as the talk says, it's a little bit of a lightning session, so we're going to cover a lot of content, and I'm going to be fast, but I can guarantee you if you've registered for it, we'll send you the slides, don't worry about taking pictures, and we're also going to send you a white paper that we've been jointly publishing with Databricks on. So with that, let me maybe spend a little bit of time in terms of what's different this time around. And we've all seen enough folks with the title CDO or CDAO, and what does that mean more from a concrete data perspective? I think there are sort of 5 guiding factors that we see almost all biopharmaceuticals of different shapes and size can tend to deal with, right? One is obviously the emergence of AI and Gen AI. Folks are trying to more invest less so on use cases, but whole capability transformation. From a data perspective, what's been different is really multimodal data, and that's manifested across different domains and divisions in terms of either looking at clinical data, protein structures, audio, video, MRI files, or DICOM images, all the work to most simplistically ingesting just unstructured PDFs and data. And that's caused a lot of people to really think about their data strategy and data products in a different lens. And we'll talk about some of that in terms of what does that mean through the subsequent slides. The second part is there's always been new vendors and entrants in choice, but the new vendor landscape continues to change quite a bit, and you see more and more vendors enter in this space which are either providing data from specific channels or data which is a lot more deeper, longitudinal, which go more therapeutic area specific. And most organizations are trying to figure out how do they combine longitudinal data with existing transactional and available data to create what you call as the magic sauce so that they can continue to get more deeper, better insights. And that still continues to be pervasive and an issue. The last part is, as you sort of think about it, is autonomy of data teams. What we are seeing is proliferations of different types of data teams. There are teams that are in enterprise IT, divisional IT, but you also now see the recurrence of data teams that also sits in the peripheries of either early research discovery teams, there are data teams in manufacturing sites, and so forth. So the question really becomes is, how do you ensure autonomy for these teams so that you're building things at the right pace, but also building conform to the right structures so that you're maturing your enterprise data assessment across the landscape? There's some growing pains here, and we'll talk about different operating models that enable the growth of autonomy of data teams, but yet be successful cumulatively together. There's also a challenge of harmonizing how you procure data. So procurement of data also continues to be a challenge. And most organizations are often asked with the question on, am I getting the right investment out of my data? Am I buying the right sources? So continual investment on picking the right vendors of choice also continues to be a problem. Demand for insights continues to go, but obviously with the advent of ChatGPT, people are looking for more chat interfaces on how do you talk to your data. So there are more concepts around agents for data and interacting with agents, not only for just data visualization, but data management, data quality, and essentially curating the entire data lifecycle. And last but not least, with the proliferation of data and data types, there's even much more scrutiny around compliance, privacy, and guidelines are how to best manage secure data, but yet experiment and innovate and be leading edge in it. So let me maybe ground a little bit in terms of, talk about a data strategy, but what does that really mean? And when we talk to organizations, we see sort of two manifestations of data strategy. We sort of think about it more in terms of what is a functional data strategy, and we see organizations being a lot more mature in this aspect because there are lesser barriers to innovate and get coherence and conformance there. And then what we call is our enterprise data strategy, which enables you to really look across the organization and bring the cumulative power of data together. Now, why do you need a functional data strategy and what does that enable, right? So let me just maybe use one example. So when we think about R&D or research and development, you still see a little bit of siloed where folks tend to manage their early clinical data differently and your development your early research data and your clinical data in two different instances separately and for a variety of reasons. But there's a lot of commonality in terms of bringing these data sets together. So for example, one example that I can think of is, as you think about secondary usage of products, once you've gone through pharmacovigilance and you've seen the adverse events, you can use forward and reverse translation to potentially innovate new products coming out of it. And for that, it requires tight coordination and interoperability between your clinical assets and early discovery assets, right? And you could extrapolate that pattern to manufacturing and supply chain, to commercial, where you have to bring patient, HCP, and access data together, and all the way to enterprise, especially when you're starting to bring employee, procurement, and HR functions together, right? And this sort of gives you to a whole bunch of data products and the concept of 360 products, which we'll talk about in a bit. So as I mentioned in the earlier slide, you see a lot more maturity in organizations being able to stitch their functional products together. We see majority of the organizations struggle to innovate and build coherent enterprise products together to be able to stitch this in a cohesive way. And I think part of the reason there is, when you think about AI use cases, we see some of the highest complexity and the highest value use cases when you're able to bring your enterprise assets together. Let me give you a couple of examples to sort of bring that to light. So if you think about ESG and ESG reporting, you really need to bring your packaging information, your supply chain logistics information, and also a lot of information around your manufacturing artwork and quality together to be able to really respond to ESG and other financial regulations together. Organizations have these data siloed in multiple instances and almost make it very episodic when they try to bring that together as opposed to having a consistent framework and methodology to be able to do so. I could take the same use case and extrapolate that to something like an agile M&A playbook, right? This industry is going to continue to have a lot of bolt-on deals and continue to be fairly active in an M&A situation. But we see organizations react to it in a very episodic way versus be M&A ready in terms of having their enterprise data strategy and assets together. Now, one of the ways we've been working with a lot of clients to enable them to have the enterprise and functional data products together is by really looking at the lakehouse architecture, which enables you to build all your functional assets and enterprise assets together in the same momentum with the same conform and convergence standards, right? So that's how we've been partnering very closely with Databricks on this one. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in terms of defining what a data product is. I think it was good to sort of orient in terms of this concept of a data product mindset. And a data product mindset is going to be very essential and almost a cornerstone to enabling your enterprise data strategy. So what's different this time around is, as you think about data products, I think if you look at the genesis of a lot of the AI use cases that we see across the spectrum, where our clients have really scaled up and moved on from experimentation, there's a constant theme of bringing unstructured multimodal data along with structured assets to enable some of the high-value AI use cases, right? I'll give a couple of examples to sort of bring it to light. When you think about manufacturing, if you think about quality deviations, you have to bring unstructured and structured data together. And that transfers across a number of systems like TrackWise, LIMS, and other deviation structured content. Similar to that, if I think about medical writing, that also brings together a number of unstructured elements together. And then when you think about sales and marketing and you think about the concept of a rep copilot, which brings in evidence information, rep call notes, along with all the targeting information that comes from IQVIA together. So you see the consistent theme that this is not pervasive just for R&D or manufacturing, but it's a need across the enterprise. Now, why is this important and why is this different? We noticed that when you think about managing unstructured data, historically research has been a little further advanced in terms of really tagging, labeling a lot of their unstructured content together, but that's going to be a maturity that's going to be required across the enterprise. So an area that's underinvested, and we're noticing a lot of clients double down and invest on, is how do you manage unstructured data with the same kind of data governance and maturity that you've applied for structured data together. So I just want to bring it to light, right? So this is an example where we think about AI-generated marketing content. We just wanted to bring it to light to say, it's really an ensemble of generative AI techniques, traditional machine learning techniques, and when we think about data, it's bringing both structured and unstructured assets sort of being brought together. So let me recap, right? We think there's sort of three things that are required as you mature and advance your enterprise data strategy. You need data products, you need a data mesh and a data fabric layer, and then you need an hub and a marketplace. The question is, how is this any different than what you would have heard 2-3 years back for rows and structured content? I think there are three differences as you think about it this time. For data products, as we've talked about, you need both structured and unstructured assets brought together as a cohesive data product and the right management techniques around it. When you think about the data mesh and fabric, you still need to solve for the federated governance layer, which has been a challenge just based on organizational constructs and alignment across different organizations. But now that's also going to get proliferated for unstructured data to make sure the right policies are applied on top of it. And then when you think about a marketplace, historically you've had your models, features, and also your core inventory registered to the marketplace. What's going to be different now is as you see the rise of AI and application-focused AI, you also will need a marketplace to get your applications registered, but also your protocols registered, which we'll cover in a little bit. There's a lot of emerging protocols like A2A and MCP, and we want to make sure you build your marketplace with a high degree of reusability, and essentially you don't create new patterns every time you want to deploy an AI application around it. All right, so if you think about all the stacks that we covered, you could build an assembly of tech infrastructure stacks, and all of that is fairly getting commoditized, right? Your large language models are fairly commoditized. In order for you to be differentiated, I think what's going to matter is how you verticalize and how you train this on your own proprietary data. And so what we recommend is, with this entire concept of taking data to AI, I think we've been successful in closely working with Databricks to really enable that stack all the way from creating the lakehouse architecture, surfacing all that data through the Unity catalog, and also exposing it to the Mosaic AI framework to enable things like the MCP, the model context protocols to build specific verticalized applications. An example of that would be the automated MLR promotional material case study that we've jointly done with Databricks for a number of clients, and we've extrapolated that lakehouse architecture across the enterprise from R&D, commercial, to manufacturing use cases, and we can spend some time sort of talking through it. All right, this presentation wouldn't be complete if I didn't spend some time talking about agents. Everybody's been talking about agents, everybody's talking about reasoning agents, everybody's talking about how do you apply agents to your data, functionalities around talk to data, and so forth. And we've been obviously spending a lot of time in terms of what would it take to apply agents to data. Now, we think you need 5 building blocks to bring agents to data a reality. You need data and content and API production. So when you think about building your data products, you again want to make sure they're built in a way that are modular, domain-specific, and context-driven. You want to enable and build your agentic orchestration layer, not just for your models, but also to make sure that the data is pervasive across the orchestration framework. We're going to spend some time talking about knowledge engineering because we think that's really the secret sauce of how you really bring these agents specific to your organizations, verticalized, and highly reasoning and specialized. You need to redesign, upskill your workforce. We're seeing all of that happen across the spectrum. And lastly, the operating models. Now, all these 5, similar to the themes that I've described before, were pervasive even a year, 2 years back. So what's really different this time around? So when we think about the concept of data products and when you sort of tie it back to some of the new emerging protocols, so in this case, we're going to take the example both MCP and A2A. Both protocols were announced recently. And one of our guiding principles that we've been talking to our clients and customers about is when you build your data products, build it with a high degree of modularity and context driven. So let me give you a couple of examples. So you think about tools and API integration of some of these data products. You've got the core structured data products like your real world data or data from your centralized data warehouse. Now, in addition to that, you also have to sort of think about your content strategy, which is your documents which are tagged to certain domains. For example, it could be data from PubMed, it could be your evidence studies and so forth. Now, you want to make sure that the lowest common denominating factors as you build these data products are built in such a way that when you invoke some of these protocols, you're allowing for the lowest level of modularity to be invoked by these protocols. That way, you're not redesigning each of these call functions every time you're redoing a different use case, a different vertical, or a different area of the business. And that requires a lot of structured thinking and planning, and I call it like the city planning exercise that you have to be fairly diligent about. One of the things I was going to highly encourage this group is there's actually a session later today where Databricks is actually presenting how do you use the Mosaic AI framework and integrate with MCPs so that you can not only design for tools, API integrations, but also for data products so that they can be evoked effectively. I'll sort of leave you with one more thing. One of the areas that I've been spending a lot of time on, and we've got a couple of key members who are here, is really talking about the SAP Databricks Alliance, which is how do you bring structured, unstructured assets, and we're going to see some of these large enterprise systems talk about their data product release in a similar fashion form. And in order to effectively integrate with those, you're going to need to master some of these protocols so that you build once and you reuse them time and again. Now, last but not least, I want to sort of leave you all with a little bit of a parting thought. And this is something that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about. Just bear with me as I sort of talk through this concept of what I call is a knowledge data product. Meaning, as you think about building your core data products, your core mesh architecture, your right governance framework, I think the secret sauce lies in how do you make it relevant to the knowledge you imbibe it, which really it gives you the rise of true reasoning agents, which are curated and grounded to your organization with your data. Let me give an example to sort of bring this to light. So let's assume I'm going to take a commercial organization with an oncology portfolio, and one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to create a dynamic targeting for an immuno-oncology product for the US market. Now that means for that specific product, I need to have very specific rules of what I'm going to look for in Komodo data, IQVIA data, and sort of marry that up with existing evidence studies, with key metrics like PFS, OS, and so forth, and really build a custom analysis toolkit. Now, those are business rules that are very specialized and focused to your organization, your function. So tomorrow, if I really have to use agents to say, through prompt engineering techniques, say, help me go identify the TRX, NRX, or the market share for that product, an agent which is trained on generally available data is not going to be able to cater to exact business rules, challenges that are endemic to your organization. So what you need is really a place where you could document a lot of these repositories. Think of it in terms of getting your business rules, your analytical techniques, and all of them packaged into a knowledge data product that you can surface out to an agent, which then continues to train on context, products, and analysis that are specific to your organization. And that's how agents will context learn, train, and evolve and mature as you think about it. The concept of a knowledge data product is in early experimentation stages. Databricks and us have been working together with a number of our large life sciences clients to sort of bring this to light. But as you go back home today and sort of reflect on this conversation, I'd want you to think about four things. One, how mature and how advanced is your ability to manage multimodal data and unstructured data? Second, how are you differently thinking about your marketplaces and making sure you bring reusability as a key factor to a lot of this? Third, how are you going to manage agent-to-agent protocols and make sure you do it with first principles of build once and reuse again? And lastly, how are you going to unlock the secret sauce of knowledge data products, which is endemic to your organization, and you can continue to context learn and grow through that? I'll pause there. That's sort of the end of the presentation. I know we went through it very fast. That was the intent of the lightning rounds. But we'll make sure we'll send you content, and we're going to be releasing a white paper where we've built a lot of these data products for each of these functions as a starting point for you to consume and learn. I have my colleague Sasha from Databricks here, who's my partner in crime. If there are any questions around product releases, technical implementation, we'd be happy to take it together. And have a good Databricks event, and thank you for joining the session.